Hello, I'm Iain Scott. In this segment of our interviews, I asked Father Lee to reminisce. So here he is with 6 or 7 anecdotes about his visit to the Wagner shrine at Bayreuth, about meeting the great diva Zinka Milanov, the uber tenors John Vickers and Placido Domingo, the general manager of the Met, Joe Volpe, the great bass baritone Thomas Stewart and his stellar wife Evelyn Lear, and this segment concludes with his reminiscence of meeting the chairman of the Wagner Society of Washington, D.C., Jim Holman. Here's Father Lee.
About singing the national anthems at the ballpark? Well, I was invited by the president of my college, St. Michael's College, Mr. Richard Alway, to sing the national anthems at the ballpark and give the college a little publicity. So I applied, and I was told, well, send us a demo copy and of both the Star-Spangled Banner, which has a pretty leaping range, as big as You'll Never Walk Alone and almost as big as Old Man River, and O Canada, which is a nice comfortable range of 1 octave. So I sent in a demo and I was accepted, and then I was told, of course, we always use the demo. We couldn't pick up a voice and broadcast it through all of the ballpark and control the acoustics. So I felt humbled, but I made my way to second base and stood there, and I was afraid I was going to forget the words to O Canada, because the words to O Canada are always being changed. Fortunately, from second base, you look right into one of the jumbotrons, and they printed the words of O Canada as I mouthed them. And then I heard my voice coming back at me through all the loudspeakers. I had hoped that I would sound like Robert Merrill, who often sang the national anthems for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And when I really heard my voice thundering through the loudspeakers, I thought, that's not Robert Merrill, that's Leonard Warren.
Tell me about some of your Bayreuth experiences.
Well, we all know how hard it is to get into Bayreuth, and over the years, I got to be pretty good at getting myself in. If you saw a gentleman come up and reach into his pocket, you had to decide in advance whether he spoke German, French, English, Spanish, whatever, and you'd go up to him immediately and say, Vous avez quelque chose pour changer? Haben Sie etwas zu verkaufen? That is, have you anything to sell? Because usually there's somebody there whose wife doesn't want to come or for some reason has an extra ticket. And as soon as he says ja or oui, you say, I'll take it. Because the other people will be right behind you. And well, one time it was only a Tannhäuser. And I thought, this is only my 9th favorite opera, I don't have to get in. But it was literally just minutes to go, and I didn't have a ticket. And a lovely lady came up to me and said, would you like to see this opera? And I said, yes. And she took me to a doorway on the side of the building that I'd never spotted before, and up a staircase that was very private. And at the top of the staircase there stood Winifred Wagner. I didn't know what to think, but the lady whisked me right past Winifred before I could say anything except a quick Grüß Gott. And we sat down in the box. It was a box seat, and the Tannhäuser started, and I thought, searching my memory, I think I'm sitting in Hitler's seat, because I'd seen pictures of Hitler at performances at Bayreuth, where he was sitting in the seat farther in the Wagner box closest to the center. That's where I was. And I thought to myself, what am I supposed to do for this woman in payment for this special ticket? And when the first act of Tannhäuser was over, she said, now buy me a drink and walk me around the grounds. She didn't want to have to talk to Winifred. She needed an escort. I was very pleased with myself, of course. And then the next morning at the railway station in Bayreuth, this handsome young American kid came up to me and said, "You got in last night, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "That lady asked me first, but I didn't know enough German."
About the first time you met Zinka Milanov.
Well, I first met Zinka Milanov backstage at the Masonic Temple after an Aida in 1945, I think. And her Aida that night was, well, like the little girl with the little curl in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good, but when she was bad, she was horrid. And she was crying in her dressing room. But she signed my program and my friend's program, and of course I've treasured it ever since. Then years later I met Zinka after she did an intermission for Richard Moore, and he had played her triumphant single best recording, the D'Amor sul ali rosé from Il Trovatore. And that's the evening where she said, "Il Trovatore was my destiny." She might have been able to float pearly pianissimos that came around the ceiling in the Masonic Temple, and it sounded like it was being sung to you alone. But when she spoke, she was very Slavic. And I told her, "Madame Milanov," I almost said the wrong thing. "Madame Milanov, I first met you long ago. Madame Milanov, I first met you in Detroit." And she said, "Detroit, yes. We had a good public there. My brother died there."
Tell me about the time that you met John Vickers.
Well, that was when I gave 3 lectures for Trinity College on Wagner, the terrible man and his truthful art. And it was at a reception at Trinity Common Room where John Vickers came up to me, and I didn't know he was going to be present. He was going to be there that night for the opening of the 3 lectures. And you know how Vickers sang Wagner beautifully with great feeling and truth and passion, but he regarded him as a terrible man, and that's probably why he showed up. In any case, I was trembling in my shoes, and when I came to give the lecture, he was sitting in the front row. But he liked it a lot, and he stayed for all 3 nights. And at one point in the proceedings, after I'd explained the 3rd act of Tristan, kind of borrowing from Joseph Kerman's book, Opera as Drama, John got up and asked a question. He said, "Isn't the 3rd act of Tristan really about?" And then he went on what he thought it was really about. And all I could say was, "John, you're right. You sang it, I didn't." One time I was sitting in that box, and in the 2nd row, which isn't the easiest row to see from, I suppose, but somebody brushed in a wet overcoat, pushed his wife right past me and sat her in front of me, and made a lot of noise, and the opera had already started. It was La Boheme. And I turned and gave the guy a nasty look, and then I saw that it was Placido Domingo. And I thought to myself, oh my dear, what are we going to say during intermission when we all go to Mr. Volpe's office? So when the 1st act of La Boheme was over, I said, "Mr. Domingo, I'd like to thank you for many fine performances. And the last time I saw La Boheme here, you were singing Rodolfo." He said, "That's nothing. Now I conduct."
Very good friends with Joe Volpe.
Well, I once told Mr. Volpe, "You know, this town is run by 3 Italians, Rudy Giuliani, Joe Torre, and Joe Volpe. Actually, Mr. Volpe was very good to me, and I was able to take my fellow Brazilians on several occasions to New York and seat them in the general manager's box. Well, I will remember one night at the Holmans when we were all gathered around the piano, and Tom Stewart and Evelyn Lear were with us, and we were singing pop songs mostly. And I asked Tom and Evelyn to sing. And Tom was very dubious about this, and I said, why not Old Man River? I can play it in the key of C. You'll have your low G, which is still good, as your lowest note, and a good E as your high note. And he said, but I don't know the words. And I said, I'll give them to you as en route. And so he sang it, and he sang it very, very well. And I had to prompt him only occasionally. Then it was Evelyn's turn, and she said, how about Send in the Clowns? And I had to admit, I really don't know it very well, but if you sing it, I can follow along. And it's a very tricky song, Stephen Sondheim, you know. And she was about halfway through it when she said, stop. And she didn't say, what do you know? I asked her, let's just do something in 32 bars. And she said, they say it's wonderful? I said, wonderful. And she sang it very well.
How did you first get in touch with or meet Jim Holman?
Well, I got a letter from a brash young man in Washington saying, Dear Father Lee, would you give me advice writing a book on Wagner? Check 1. Yes, no, or get lost.